So an address by the President was on the cards, but now the need for restrictions might be more urgent than ever. To use the term used by scientists yesterday, South Africa has entered a period of exponential growth in COVID-19 cases. It was confirmed that Delta is dominating new infections, that variant, and since then there has been a flurry of meetings. The President expected to address us at 8 o'clock. To discuss, we're joined by the SABC's political editor, Mzwandile Mbeje. What will the President say in light of the Delta revelations, do you think?
A very good evening to you, Francis, and the viewers. And of course, when you speak about the Delta variant, so you simply remember those images that we saw a couple of weeks ago, Francis, in India. So that was the variant that was driving that surge in that particular country. And I remember in May, a few cases were reported here in South Africa, but then, so no one knew the extent to which that variant had permeated the society of South Africa. And of course, that briefing by the scientists yesterday basically brought to the fore the extent to which this country is struggling with this variant, particularly the economic hub of the country. So if Francis, Johannesburg, rather Gauteng, which is the economic hub, is being overwhelmed, can you just imagine if this spreads to other provinces? In fact, this variant, according to the scientists, though there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, appears to have something like double mutation, so which means it's easily transmissible, and of course it transmits fast. So that leaves the President, of course, with no choice but to act. And we heard that cry from the scientists yesterday, from the people who really study this, to say in order for them to be even able to get a grasp to this, let's go for something a bit tighter in terms of movement so that they can be able to then deal with it. So this evening when the President speaks, so we expect that restrictions will definitely be tighter. What we are not sure about is whether will be elevated to level 4 or it will just be level 3, but with stricter measures and of course focusing on compliance. But depending on whether we do all of this, if we as individuals don't take responsibility, I don't think we'll make the difference. So I think that message will come through from the President, Francis. And of course, we expect to hear him talk about the issue of the vaccination plan, because it's clear now that this fight will only be dealt with once we are able to vaccinate as many people as possible.
Yeah, and even according to earlier projections, we're just nowhere near where we wanted to be as a country in terms of vaccinations. And why you touched on something, Gauteng is the economic hub. Perhaps that's why our government has been hesitant to take a differentiated approach. You closed down Gauteng, there's so much movement of goods and people from other provinces. It's very, very difficult. Are we expecting now a differentiated approach? Some people are calling for alcohol, for example, to be completely banned in Gauteng because the numbers here are much higher. Maybe gatherings here dealt differently. Will we see a differentiated approach or still the usual nationwide approach?
Well, given that Gauteng is the economic hub, so which means if you put stricter measures here on this province, so necessarily other provinces or other areas will be affected because they do business with this province. And of course, I mean, this accounts for about 35% of the country's GDP. That's quite huge. So, but I think there is a need, perhaps when it comes to issues like the alcohol sales, perhaps you can, let's say, get into that differentiated approach. Perhaps saying in Gauteng, the issue of alcohol perhaps for 2 weeks is a complete ban, and it may not necessarily be so in other provinces which are able perhaps to deal with these issues. So it will really be interesting, as you were saying, Francis, because they have been making it very clear that as much as the issue of saving lives is quite important, but the issue of saving livelihoods is quite important as well. If you then decimate livelihoods, yes, you'll save lives, But after the lives are saved, so what happens? Where will people go to? They will go into the very same situation where they will struggle. You would have some sort of a cycle. So he has to strike a very delicate balance in making sure that he doesn't shut the economy completely, but of course, you make sure that the institutions like the health institutions are not completely overwhelmed, because if they are overwhelmed, you have a crisis on your hand. And I don't think there's anyone, Francis, who wants to see those scenes that we saw happening in India when you see people dropping on the streets. So it doesn't look good at all. Something must be done, and of course it will be done. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
All right, thank you very much. SABC News' political editor Mzwandile Mbeje.